In the program it says that Hans Olav Syvertsen, who is the head of the financial committee at the Norwegian Parliament's financial committee, should attend, but he gave his note last evening that he couldn't come, but we still, I will treat Pia as if she was Syvertsen. Almost. I gave you some of his questions, and I would like to start, Pia. Thanks for the presentation. As I mentioned in the beginning, this is a report which comes 1 month after the Swedish report. And you also point out some of the differences between the Norwegian and the Swedish report. What I think is the common thing between Norway and Sweden is the recommendations that you made in the report. There are no explicit recommendation of divestment. There are several issues concerning how to engage. You have a strong belief in engagement, or do we not? Could you please comment on that issue?
Yes. Okay. Yes. No. My personal opinion is that I have started to work in this field with divestment as the goal, and then it is clearly that sometimes you can also see if it is possible to do engagement. But I think that if engagement shall have any point, you have to be open, and that is why the recommendations are so concentrated about the documentation and the openness, because people on the ground in Sarawak, they don't know a thing. If, for example, not Clare had done this blog, I mean, you don't get information, and that is one of the main issues. So I don't think that we now must say what is best or not best by divest or engagement, but it is two ways to arrive to a goal, which is to better conditions on the ground and better ethical ways of doing investments all over the world.
Yeah, the Swedes also put much emphasis on investigating more. Do you think the Norwegian bank has the same shortcoming?
In what way?
No, whether they should investigate more.
The bank should investigate.
In the Swedish report, they pointed out that the bank should investigate more.
It depends what you mean by investigate, because it is clearly also a practical question, also about how many people do you have engaged. But I think that it is a lot of information in this field. For example, from the oil fund, they have a lot of persons which are engaged in doing these investigations, and it is strange that this information is a kind of private property which you can sell as goods on the markets, and I think this is something that should belong to everyone, this kind of information.
Yeah, keep that thought, because that is coming back. But I wanted to ask you something. You have pointed out that there's a different kind of challenge for the oil fund compared to the private commercial banks, and it goes with openness. And Future in Hands, and even you personally, was a driving force when the oil fund started to divest in coal companies. Could you say something about if you're going to put more pressure on the oil fund to become more open, to become more transparent, what would it take?
I think, the oil fund has, as I said before, it has changed and developed, and the main forces in this challenge, this development, has been the public opinion. It has been investigation, revelation. It has been like NGOs as ourselves, others which are present here, which have always put a pressure. And you have to know that the oil fund is guided by the parliament. So you have a kind of democratic way of influencing the oil fund. And I think that the customers of the banks is also a democratic force to also change the policy in a better way to the banks, of the banks.
Yeah. Also, from your experience, by engaging the political system of Norway, does Norwegian politicians care about these values, sustainability, in the amount that they are actually find some reasons to change the oil fund?
It's a very interesting question, because they start to say, it's impossible. You know, when we were saying that the whole oil fund had to have ethical guiding lines, all the establishment said, it is absolutely impossible. 3 years later, they had to eat it, what they had said, because then it was introduced. So, I mean, things are changing, and the politicians are changing. For example, when we were starting to working with coal, the first was, well, maybe we could say that the oil fund should get out of the coal mines. It was some few billions. And then, after 3 months of information, I will say, it is a kind of information campaign, they were selling out for many, many billions, and we have this 30% limit, which is one of the criteria.
30% limit, that's the 30% of the company should not be gaining.
Yes, if it is more than 30%, it has to go out.
If it comes from mining.
Not only, but also energy, which comes from coal.
Okay. Yeah, please. Matthew Smith, Head of Sustainable Investment in Storebrand. Storebrand is ranked among sustainable companies worldwide. They're ranked in the 100 most sustainable companies worldwide, which is announced by the World Economic Forum. You have 7 people working on sustainable issue. You also manage 1.2 million Norwegian pensions in Norway. I don't know how many million in Sweden, but being a proportion of the Norwegian society, you're quite a big player. You're an actor, significant actor. You have been climate neutral since 2008, I could read, as well. So this time you also, as in November, end up in the top league when it comes to sustainability. You have a strategy which is a combination of divestment, engagement of own staff, and engagement of external consultants. Could you say something about the part of engagement, which one works in the most efficient way when it comes to using external consultants or doing it by your own staff? Please.
Can I say both? Can I say both? Because I think we need both.
Please.
Both strategies.
Enlighten us, please.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just from our own experience, we use an external data provider called Sustainalytics. They are an agency based in the Netherlands. They have 120 analysts, and they deliver to us both ESG ratings, environmental social governance ratings on companies, but also a controversy screening. So they pick up cases of environmental abuse or human rights abuses around the world, and they in the course of their information gathering, they also have direct contact with companies, and I think this is a really important way of engagement to demonstrate to companies that there is a need and for quite detailed environmental and social and governance information from investors. That signal to give to companies is quite important. So on a broad scale, to increase transparency, to increase reporting on the type of issues that we think are important, they have a very important role to play. But I think if you're going to address very specific issues, specific themes like palm oil plantations and establishment, Borneo deforestation, I don't think there's any replacement for more sort of specified in-house teams that can really pick out an issue or a group of companies and really put significant pressure on those companies. But I think there's a number of prerequisites for success. I don't think engagement works in all cases. Firstly, you need to have quite a significant ownership level, either alone or in partnership with other investors. I think that's an important prerequisite. Storebrand, even though we have a lot of money, if you put it all together, we're a minority owner in every company that we invest in. Not just a little minority owner, but a tiny minority owner. We own less than 1% of a company. So to have any effect whatsoever, we need to team up with other investors, and that's how we have the most effect. But also, I think, like I said, targeted themes and companies are important, not to spread yourself too thin, but also to pick companies that have some sort of momentum for change. Not all companies are willing to change, are willing to go into dialogue, are willing to look at their practices. And I think, in those cases, it's really a lost cause.
Do you have any examples on success with teaming up with other investors? Do you have some you could share with us?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the best examples is Repsol, which is a Spanish oil company. Now, Repsol it's an ongoing engagement that's been going for over 10 years with the company. We started out engaging with the company in 2008 when reports came through of their oil exploration in South America and accusations that they were going into areas where there were uncontacted indigenous tribes and didn't have any policy or any way of following up what would happen to these tribes or to these people when they started mining operations in those areas. So we engaged with the company on those issues and from 2010 teamed up with a number of other investors and formed an investor group that has had quite some success, both in changing policy. So they've gone from having no policy or no idea whatsoever about how they're going to manage Indigenous people's rights in the areas that they are in, to having best practice policies, but also they've also in a specific area, Block 39 in Peru, they've actually withdrawn from the area because of these issues that they couldn't resolve. And that's, of course, a very positive signal from the company.
You also have divested in 2 of the companies which are in the report today. Was some of them related to palm oil? IOI was directly related to palm oil and to the fact that they had no way, again, policy or practice of limiting or managing the environmental effects of their operations and no way of handling the indigenous communities that their operations were affecting. BHP Billiton we've also excluded, but that was another case in South America, so that's not directly related. We also had Wilmar, which is the world's largest palm oil producer, excluded for a time, but have included them on the basis of their improvements in policy and of a fall in the number of controversies related to the company. Yeah. So we feel that they're on the right track, although there's, of course, a long way to go. Okay. Because I guess Wilmar has some issues on the subsidiaries, but we shan't go into the details right now. I would like to introduce Felix Nilsson. Flew in from Sweden today. You work as a special advisor for Nordea.
Yes.
And you are 1 out of 18 people working with sustainability in Nordea. You told me that the amount of people who is working with sustainability is increasing in Nordea. So you have a big start with 18 people. You have also recently been in Sumatra.
Yes.
And it was earlier this year, if I was told right. Do you have any experience, any thoughts about what you saw in Sumatra and how relevant that is for the case of Borneo? Or the Sarawak, which is the more appropriate notion?
Yes, of course. I think from a Nordea point of view, because we're talking about here, can investors and banks, do they afford to be sustainable and incorporate these ethical and sustainable topics? Then I would say, yes, of course. What we can't afford is not doing it, right? If you only look at the IOI case here, they lost their RSPO certification, the Round Table of Sustainable Palm Oil certification in 2015, and they lost a lot of their customers from that, and their share price dropped 30%. So that's just one case of how important it is that the companies that we invest in are really, looking into the environmental, social, and business ethics part of the business. So that's also why we try to look at these issues from a more proactive side and learn about the industries and the companies we invest in. So we went to Sumatra and also to Singapore to meet with a lot of stakeholders within the palm oil industry. We met with big NGOs, and we also met with the largest palm oil producer, including Wilmar. And our outcome from the trip is that we really understand, the complexity of the palm oil industry, and it's not a quick fix. As we've seen on the film, that it's large. The problems are correlated to, palm oil has been a part of the economic development in Indonesia, and it's an important part of that journey. But it's also maybe not, an industry that has been regulated in a way that it should be. So we have a problem from a regulation point of view. We also have lack of demand from the largest buyers of palm oil are Indian and Chinese buyers, and they don't really go to the palm oil plantation companies and say, we demand sustainable palm oil. So when a European or when we try to put pressure on these companies, from Wilmar, for instance, they have thousands of suppliers within their own supply chain. And if they put too high demands on their suppliers, they will just go to another buyer. So all the buyers needs to come together. And then also from an investor point of view, we need to put and set standards on these companies. So we really got the understanding that this is a complex issue, but we as investors has a big role to play, and we can push the companies, but we can't do it.
Do you have any success story to tell about engagement and pushing companies?
Yes, I believe that India has a lot of success stories, and normally when we do engagement and we travel to meet companies on the ground, we normally have a TV crew and we record this, so we have a lot of documentations actually on the web if you're interested to look at these cases. And I agree with Matthew here that normally you would need to be a big owner in the company in order to make a change. But we actually have a case going on right now where we, as a small owner in a lot of companies, has been able to make a large difference. And that's if you look at the pharmaceutical industry, and a lot of the production within the pharmaceutical industry has been outsourced to regions in different parts of the world, and India being one of them. And there's an area called Hyderabad with a lot of water scarcity. And there, a lot of the Western large pharmaceutical companies have put their production there, and they have really limited practices on how they deal with environmental issues. So surrounding this big pharmaceutical park, there's devastating effects on the environment, and there's devastating effects on the oceans nearby. So what we did when we came back from this trip was that we contacted the largest, around 20 of the largest pharmaceutical companies in our portfolios. We had a meeting with them, and we understand that they don't put enough pressures on the suppliers, and the suppliers themselves don't have enough policies on the environmental issue. So these dialogues had some effects, so we got to present from this big industry initiative called the Pharmaceutical Supply Chain Initiative, where we got to present our findings. We showed a movie from the case, and the industry initiative, where all the largest pharmaceutical companies are involved, they agreed to step up and really push this within the industry. So now we have dialogue, and they are progressing on this, and we will also make additional field visits to see how they will follow up on these issues. So that's one example of how we, as a relatively small owner, actually, by being active, finding a new kind of topic, being vocal about it, telling about it in the media, showing a movie, that we actually, as an investor, can have an impact.
But Nordea visited Sarawak in 2011, and you weren't there. But did the visit in Sarawak, in Malaysia, in 2011, lead to any kind of publicity about what you saw and the findings? Did you have any results from engagement from that trip?
When we went on the trip to the Sarawak and the Borneo region, that was also more from a learning point of view. So to actually go and dig deep and find these hard cases, it takes a lot of time, and that was not that type of that journey. So that journey, it added, how can we as an investor, when we talk to to different companies within the palm oil industry, which expectations can we set and which questions should we ask in order to find out more. So it was more from a learning perspective.
According to the report, which is published today, you also have a lot of use of external consultants doing the assessment of companies. Nordea's got. And some of these knowledge which is occurring is shared. Some is just for something you buy from the consultants. Could you say something about the value of information which is shared? And I think about the information that is in the corporate human rights index or the Dow Jones sustainability index. Are they valuable to investors, institutional investors, to get a better understanding on which companies to invest in?
Yes, I believe so. I think, as Matthew also pointed, we use these consultants and they give a lot of good input on these kind of issues, but also the work that's being done now by the Swedwatch and the report that's being here by the Etisk bankguide is good research that we can use in our own dialogue with the companies, and it also enables to put pressure on the companies. I can mention one of these research or the benchmark, the corporate human rights benchmark, which is a collaboration between different investors, where Nordea is one of them, where we wanted to find out and have more knowledge about the human rights impact from the mining sector and also in the agricultural sector. So what we did in this initiative was to create a benchmark with the 100 largest companies within their sectors and how their policies and how they act on these different issues. So then you create a benchmark where you can see, and you can find this benchmark online, where you can grade the companies, how good they are on their human rights practices. And this information is going to be available for us as investors when we meet the companies and the dialogues, but all the information collected in the research of following up to this index is also available online, not only just for us, but for everybody who wants to share this information. So that's one cooperation where we really bring up human rights issues and make them public for everybody.
Yes, Jan Erik Forne, Head of Communication in the Norwegian Bankers Association. Finans Norge is an interest organization for the 125 banks that we have in Norway, asset managers and even the insurance companies. So you have many companies behind you which you are supposed to represent. The typology of the Norwegian bank structure is many small banks, a few larger regional banks, and some central banks with large. We have large financial institutions that we see ends up in the best division in the report. We have KLP, we have Storebrand, we have DNB, and those are, to my knowledge, the three largest financial institutions on the Oslo stock. What about the smaller banks? Could, let's say, a medium-sized Norwegian bank, what we call a savings bank here, could they ever become strong on sustainability?
Yes, I do believe so. But I think what we heard here from both Nordea and Storebrand, they have, the best in class. They have been working on this for many years. They have built up a lot of competence. They have a lot of manpower. They have put a lot of efforts and resources into guidelines, investigations, reporting. So I think it's not done overnight. You really have to work on this over time to come to the place where the best in class is. And of course, the smaller banks have smaller resources. But I truly believe that as a field of competence develops, it will be easier also for the smaller companies to adapt and copy the ways of the larger banks. So actually, I believe so. And I think it's important to see here in the report that, I would like to kind of start with crediting Etisk bankguide for the work both on the bank guide, but also this case study, because I think the strategy of race to the top, as you have kind of stated your strategy, is a good way of motivating banks and other financial institutions to be transparent and to give the information and put it out in the marketplace and put it out in public, so that customers and others can react to that. I think that's a very good strategy, and I think also the banks been both involved in this case study and in the Etisk bankguide have shown a very large degree of openness and transparency and given you the truthful and honest questions, answers. And that is a very good start, because without that transparency, you kind of can't go into the next phase of the discussion, which is, well, how can you work on these issues? What kind of standards should you apply to? What are the main challenges for a regional bank, for instance, to deal with this? So I think that, we both credit to the banks and, of course, to Etisk bankguide for this work.
Thanks. But in order for smaller banks, let's say they have 50 employees, they won't be able to build up their own competence on sustainability. So in order to gain enough knowledge about the issues, there will be a demand for shared information.
Yeah.
Which role could Finance Norway play in providing information to the smaller banks or even the medium-sized banks?
Yeah. First of all, we have high on our agenda to kind of put focus on sustainable lending, sustainable investment, responsible investment. I think that's something that we can focus on and address towards our members, saying that this is an important issue to look into. Secondly, I don't believe that an organization as Finance Norway can learn anything away to Storebrand or KLP or DNB or the best, but we can at least kind of maybe try to educate and motivate those who are in the starting block of starting to dig into this matter. A good start, but because it's very complicated, and there's a lot of different, as it said in the report here also, there's no common international guideline or standard on reporting on all these things. So it's a kind of who do you believe and who do you don't believe, what are you going to follow, which guidelines are you going to go comply by. It's a lot of confusion, I believe, and maybe we can help them start at the right point and then build on step by step from that starting point.
Because what we also learn from the report and the talks we have with the banks is the definition of social responsibility. And among smaller banks, they have defined social responsibility more as an anthroposophic contribution to the local community. They are sponsoring the football team and they are building football pitches. But that is not so much what we are measuring here.
No, and I think that's the traditional way of thinking about social responsibility. I mean, if you go 5 or 10 years back in time, that was kind of the way of looking at social responsibility. I think the representative of Nordea here is stating it quite right when he says that you shouldn't only be. It's good to do good. It's good to do good, but you also have to. I think the real change will come when financial institutions see that it's a financial risk to go into projects and invest in companies or lend money to companies that are not compliant with social responsibility and sustainability and ethical standards, because you are in the risk of losing your money. I think that's an important kind of wake-up call that certainly has been. It's certainly known to many of the large international, also Norwegian players, but it also had to trickle down to those who haven't had the same focus for as many years as the best ones.
Okay. Thanks. Clare, you have heard Scandinavian optimism here and a lot of emphasis on engagement in companies that banks invest in. And you heard some success stories. Are these Scandinavian naivety that we hear? Why don't we divest more? What do you think about the balance between divestment and engagement?
Well, I'm impressed by many of the sentiments that I've heard here, and they've prompted a sort of theoretical suggestion, actually, as I've been listening to what the banks have and have not clearly been doing. And it occurs to me that one thing I've never seen operating on a shoestring as I do in places like Borneo is a banker going looking. And I think you're remarkably well equipped to do that, actually, before you start investing large sums of money in oil palm. And for example, here's a theoretical suggestion. I put what little money I had into a preliminary survey into the palm oil business in Borneo because I was very worried, and I put some of my very small media budget into paying a few people to go down on the ground on the palm oil plantations. What we're talking about is indentured labour and slavery. It's called people trafficking these days. It's called hundreds of thousands of migrants who have their passports taken away and live in very, very frightening, difficult situations working on these plantations where effectively their situation is one of slavery. Now that's the human rights atrocity that very few people talk about because it's very hidden in Borneo because no one goes looking. I think that a survey could be funded into this huge scandal that anyone who knows anything about palm oil is aware of. So there's a proactive piece of investigative engagement that I would suggest would really make a difference. And that information coming out of that could then be openly available to everybody thinking about investing in the palm oil business.
But you made me aware of the North Korean prisoners who were working in the plant.
Exactly.
And you say they're difficult to find.
They are. And
It couldn't be
once
so
again,
difficult to find North Koreans in Sarawak. It should be easy to spot them.
well, not if they're underground, behind barbed wire.
Okay.
Which is the situation. But it doesn't mean you can't. And, with a little bit of dedication, and that's what we did. I and then, another journalist team that I tipped off actually went in and finished off the job using people that work on my team. And they got in, they contacted the locals, they got in there and they proved that North Korean slaves are used by the Malaysians. Now, these sorts of investigations are being left to people like us, and we're not investing or making money out of any of this. In fact, we don't have much money. We just have a conscience. So, I think if banks want to convince us, and, you're certainly doing a lot of right things that other banks aren't doing, but these are the sorts of more proactive activities that you could be assisting in, getting out into the open. And that is what forces change, because if you embarrass the politicians in these countries and you say, how can we possibly invest in a slave industry, quite apart from the appalling environmental issues and the lies. Again, I went down on the ground in Indonesia. I nearly sank, actually, into a peat bog in the process, but that's another story. But it was just me and another guy, and we went and we investigated IOI. And, we managed to show that IOI was presenting a very acceptable face, in public, and yet behind, if you went into the plantation and you went down to the bottom of it, and there was a company that they were sponsoring that was day and night tearing up the rainforest in peat areas, which is highly illegal for very good reason. Now, again, instead of having a few people operating on a shoestring to find out these, enormities, let's have a little bit more support.
This is a clear challenge for the banking industry. Could we think...
Sorry.
Could we expect some kind of cooperation doing a on-the-ground survey from the Scandinavian banks in a joint venture or something?
I would say
Felix?
let's do it. No problem. Yeah, let's do it together. But I think this is really the practical and the clear case that we can present to the companies that we invest in are really necessary. Because you have to remember, as Nordea, as a big investor, we're not investing in the companies, in the small supplier, or we almost not even invested in Wilmar. We're invested in Unilever, Nestlé, the companies that are putting pressure on Wilmar. And for them, you know, the economical profit from palm oil is relatively small. And what they are doing is that they are proactive and they engaging on these cases. So we really need to find these cases to present to them and say, okay, you're saying that you're doing a lot, but here's the case. So I think it's a good thing.
Matthew, what do you think about the challenge?
Well, I can't say it's a bad idea, can I? No, I think it's also a good idea, given that the fact, or given the premise that we need more information. Now, I'm not really sure that we do. I think what's going on in Borneo is pretty well documented. Maybe it could be documented more, but we have a large body. When Storebrand did their palm oil analysis in 2013, we didn't rely on analysts in the Netherlands, reading Malaysian newspapers. We rely on reports coming from NGOs on the ground who have seen what's going on and can report from Malaysia on the situation. And they have documented in report after report the atrocious human rights situation and the atrocious environmental situation from Borneo. That gave us more than enough information, what we need to make a decision on excluding a whole number of companies and on making a decision to invest resources in trying to engage in the companies we felt were moving in the right direction. So, of course, I mean, given that there is a need for more information in a specific area, then that's a very good idea. But I think we've got enough as it is in many ways.
Could that be that Storebrand has been in these sustainability initiatives for 15 years? And the report also demonstrates a lot of the banks were unaware of the allegations towards the companies. It was quite striking to read how many of these 5 companies, some of them is like Billington, which also is accused for child labor and forced labor. Banks don't know of this. So even though Storebrand has the knowledge, other banks don't. Could this be something that Finance Norway should facilitate, a joint survey, or even extended information sharing? We do share information about the revenues and the losses of banks, but shouldn't we share this information as well? Jan-Erik?
Yeah, so far it has not been in our mandate to kind of help the companies on their product line. So what kind of products each of our members deliver to the market is not kind of a thing that we could involve in, because then the competition authorities will come and handcuff us. So that's one of the problems with that idea. But to kind of maybe do something to share information, while if one company comes up with information about that, discussion on how that could be shared with other companies, to kind of be warned about. Now it's a hot debate on this company in that country, so if you have investments there, you should follow this debate. That might be an idea, but I'm not sure if that's something that we could take care of. I'm not ready to say yes to that idea, but certainly it's obvious that we should share more information about problematic issues.
Claire, would you like to comment on?
Yes, I think you touched on something there that was mentioned actually by a politician I met yesterday, one of your liberal politicians, which is really whether we should be looking at countries that are unacceptable or areas. And if you have somewhere like Sarawak, where the entire drive of all its policy is the enrichment of the people in power, and that can be demonstrated as we've done so, then in a way, it's how can any of their initiatives be something that you invest in? You're not looking at whether a dam has been properly assessed. You're looking at the reason for the dam. And if the reason for the dam is to make the chief minister rich, I mean, that should be the end of it.
Okay. Matthew has a response, and then Jan Erik.
Yeah, okay, I can take it. I see that. At the same time, the companies have and should have the opportunity to have different strategies. I mean, we have had a debate here about divestment contra discussion with the company that you are invested in, and there you have different kind of strategies. Some are having a clear and is easier or quicker out and divesting, while other companies have a more strategy of involving with the companies. And I don't think we should kind of take away the opportunity that each company should have their own strategy on that point.
But if we take that further, perhaps we should silence the Oslo Stock Exchange, because they are publishing key information figures, which is very important when you are doing it. So, but Matthew, do you have a comment as well?
I was just going to say that, I mean, if you want to send a very clear signal effect, then you can pull out of the whole region. And you could do that, and it's a very clear signal effect, and that might hit the newspapers, and that might have some effect, but you have to weigh that effect up against what you give up. And you then give up, when you've pulled out, you give up the opportunity to day by day get your hands dirty and to get into the operations and the running of these companies and to affect positive change. What you've done when you pull out is that you've sold your shares, Nordea and Storebrand have sold their shares, and Chinese companies move in and buy up, and the situation on the ground I don't think gets particularly much better. So if you're so it's a weighing up of the signal effect against what you can get more long term.
If you pull out of a country where the Prime Minister has been found absolutely, red-handed in stealing billions of dollars and putting them in his bank account, or of a state like Sarawak, where the Chief Minister has been caught red-handed running the entire economy and every large project for his own personal gain, then you are sending a helpful message politically that maybe it's time they acted against leaders who bring them to international shame. And I think that's a good thing to do. And then just to go on to a case study of engagement, for example, the Norwegian pension fund engaged for several years with the largest and most destructive loggers in Sarawak, Samling. And, I've done quite a lot of investigations into Samling practices. And, I didn't see any Norwegian bankers stopping all the disgraceful practices, including lying, false reporting, hosting of forestry officials in prostitute hotels where they should have been out, looking at what the truth was as far as illegal logging practices were concerned. Now, I didn't see any of that restrained by the investment by the Norwegian fund, and I think it was a very good idea that they chose to divest in the end. The same with the Chief Minister's company CMS, which again, divestment was eventually chosen as the option by Norway. There are some things that you just can't condone or help in a situation like Sarawak.
I would like to open the floor for questions now, and while people are considering the questions, I would like to address Erik Posed and Dylan Williams first. You are the makers of the movie that is going to be broadcasted on television and also at the cinema. Having heard the debate, and due to the knowledge, after 5 years it took you to make the movie, what is the step forward?
That's obviously a huge question. I think it's really positive that you're all here and that we're having this discussion, because one of the experiences that's one of the most telling parts of the story for me is we tell the historical part, which is Mutang's own story from when he first came from Sarawak, and he was excluded from the country. He traveled around the world. He tried to talk to all the politicians, and he went to the United Nations and made a very powerful speech, but the United Nations was totally empty. And in our film today, Mutang goes to the Deutsche Bank to address the Deutsche Bank, and as he begins to speak, they actually switch the microphones off. And I think that it's very interesting and the challenges ahead for the financial industry. It's a changing idea with the authority who decides as to what kind of businesses are good businesses, what is ethical, what is not, and understand the difficulties when you have thousands of different investments in all these different countries and they're owned by different, but there was one thing that came up in Sweden, which I thought was quite a good example, which was the textile industry, which 10 years ago everybody was very critical of the textile industry, and they would say we had too many suppliers, we can't control them. And then, I'm not saying I don't know the textile industry, but it seems that they've started to take less suppliers, started to have more controls over those areas. You say that you want to engage. Well, make sure you engage together so that you're more of a percent rather than 0.2%, you're maybe 1%, so you actually have a voice, so you can be. And then to ask the raison d'etre of the area and of the company. If the country, as we spoke yesterday with a politician, if it is a corrupt country with bad governance, then maybe all the guidelines of the company are fair, but in reality on the ground, it's not being carried out in that way. And I think that maybe it's an easier way to say, well, maybe this area, maybe you may argue that the company is owned by a larger company, it's a corporation, so you can't hold certain countries, sanction countries for environmental crime. Have you ever thought about that, how you take on different regions? That would be my question.
Yeah.
What, in South Africa?
No, Sarawak, different countries. I mean, we call the film the Borneo Case because you could call it Papua New Guinea case, Amazon case. It's the same system.
Felix, you want to?
I can answer that. On a broad level, when we do this analysis of a company before we invest in, we look at environmental, social, and governance issues, depending on which countries this company is involved in, and depending on which industries and which sectors. And if the company is involved in a country with higher risk maybe to corruption or higher risk to environmental issues, then we will also put higher demands on that company to have the policies and the processes in place to meet that risk. So that's the baseline for all the analysis and the proactive work is based on materiality and where does the company have the risk and what did they do to address it. So I think that's already part of the analysis process that we are doing. And I think it's hard to say that just because it's a high risk and it's a high risk sector, we should not invest in that company, because it's better for us to increase the knowledge on how to do this analysis, increase the knowledge on how can we find the companies that are actually doing a little bit more than the others, that are more proactive, and in that way we can, by investments, invest in more proactive companies. And if the company is not proactive, then we can have a dialogue and try to raise the standards. So that's what
we are about running out of time. Matti, you want to give?
No, I was just going to say there's an interesting analogy in the telecom sector. We've excluded, for example, Telia because of their complicity in human rights breaches in Uzbekistan. Now, it's not Telia itself that's doing the human rights breaches and following up dissidents and jailing dissidents, but it's the government themselves. But we've come to the conclusion that we don't think Telia can be in Uzbekistan and offer the services that they offer without being complicit in human rights. So that's one example of where we've taken the sort of stand that you are looking for in Sarawak. But it's of course different in different circumstances. So you need to take each case as it comes.
Okay, thanks. Any questions? Yes, we have the Rainforest Foundation. Yes.
No, FIVAS.
FIVAS, sorry, FIVAS.
Jonas Holmqvist from FIVAS. I think it's a very prominent challenge from Clare here to take into consideration the raison d'etre, as you said also, of companies in Sarawak, for instance, where the political government is robbing the land via these companies. How can you then judge them on whether they have governance standards and environmental standards when their business is there to rob the land, even with good environmental standards? And how can you take that into considerations? Or are you willing to take that kind of political assessment and political risk into what companies you are investing in? I hear that you are, to some extent, doing it in Storebrand, but are you doing it on such a limited scale as human rights breaches from infrastructure providers, or could you also do it on a larger scale?
We could collect some questions. If anyone else has got something, we could add them up and please don't be shy. We are a close family here now. At the back.
My name is Anja Lingsmark. I'm from the Rainforest Foundation, Norway. And we have produced many reports about Repsol and different companies operating in Indonesia and Malaysia. And I would like to thank Storebrand and KLP and the pension fund and other banks and investors for having good meetings with us and for listening to many of our advices. But I'm wondering, are you planning to do more in the next years now? Because we have a fantastic momentum now in 2020, now that hundreds of banks and governments and investors all over the world have promised to reduce or even end deforestation. So I think you should invest even more in monitoring than you have done until now, and not only lean on reports from NGOs.
Any more? Please.
Jeanette Bergen from KLP. Just wanted to give a very short comment in terms of applauding the work done by the Etisk bankguide and also the documentary coming and the film. I mean, the thing is that what is Pia's message here is that what is so important from investors is, of course, to be transparent about what we're doing and the reason why. And you know, both KLP and Storebrand and Nordea, we do exclusions and we really want to divest the bad companies, no doubt about that. But what we need to do that is actually the documentation. We need the information because we need to be able to stand in front of the companies and say, you know, we're going to divest you. We don't want to be invested in this company because of this and this and this and this. And the fact we need has to be correct. So everything that can be kind of digged out of the, to document the wrongdoings is so important for us, and we really would, you know, recommend and just continue the dialogue and continue the great work. So that's just a comment from me.
And I guess KLP would join Nordea in making the joint survey. We had one comment and 2 questions. I don't know, one was fairly directly forwarded to Matthew about the Rainforest Foundation.
Well, I mean, absolutely. We are very ambitious in terms of increasing monitoring and increasing our information that we have available, and we don't just rely on external providers. We rely on our relationships with Rainforest Foundation and Framtiden vår, hender and other organisations to help us to understand what's going on and to give us provide us with the information we need to make good decisions. So that's absolutely something we're going to continue further also. But I think it's a really difficult question to answer yours in terms of where the limit goes in terms of what you can accept in terms of companies operating in totalitarian regimes or regimes that are systematically corrupt or systematically exploitative. But we've taken the the stand that we have, I mean, we did a systematic look at the whole palm oil industry in Southeast Asia. We ended up excluding 12 of 13 companies. So basically our main thrust here was exclusion and to send a strong signal. But at the same time, we wanted to use our position as an owner to support and to encourage companies that were moving in the right direction. And we will continue to do that. We believe that where companies are making a move, it's important for us as investors to get behind them and support them and to make a lot of noise about it. So we'll continue to invest even if there are significant problems in governance.
Can I just sort of ask if you could be more specific, just in terms of beneficial ownership? Is this something you look at? For example, if you've got a dam project in Sarawak, and a lot of my investigation was looking at who was actually going to profit, and you can see if you bother to look, what percentage is absolutely earmarked for the governing family, in terms of where the money, the investment is going to go, in terms of which companies are going to get the contracts. I mean, and if you have a situation that's blatant like that, does that enter into your, your range of issues to make your judgment?
Well, you're talking about systematic corruption.
I am, yes.
Yeah, and systematic corruption is absolutely a part of the analysis that we do. Yeah. So if we have information that these companies are either paying for licenses or using their connections in a systematic way to exploit areas that they shouldn't be exploiting, then that's absolutely something that comes in.
Well, I think that was the point that 5S was making.
Yeah. Anyone who wants to answer? We are running out of time. So just the last comment on the 5S questions. Is somebody here who wants to give a direct answer to the question? It's already been in the panel. Yeah.
Well, I think if a dam is being built for the wrong reasons, in terms of where the profit is going, you could do all your other human rights and environmental, assessments. But if the purpose of the project is corrupt, to enrich the politically powerful, then that should be as good a reason as any other for not touching it.
Okay, it's past 12 o'clock, and we are being served a light meal in the hall. I would like to thank everybody who has come here today. And again, remind that there is possibility to see the whole movie. It's 1 hour and 21 minutes. It will be on Cinema Vika Kino. Okay, thank you. Come on.